Well, hello and welcome once again to the DCL podcast, where we're inviting you to sit back, relax, and we'll be on our way shortly.
Well, welcome back to the DCL podcast, your podcast helping your family cruise a little smarter. And I'd like to welcome back to the show our co-host all the way down in Florida. How you doing today, Christy?
I'm well, Steve. How are you?
Not too bad. You know, I'm excited about, I say that every episode. I'm excited about this episode, but you know what? I think everybody really wants to travel right now, don't they?
Oh my gosh. Literally everybody wants to travel.
I mean, I had to take my kid up, our oldest son, up to a soccer game yesterday, and Friday afternoon trying to go anywhere around here is just nuts because people are just out and about. They're going away for the weekend. And it's been great to finally start traveling around the U.S., but I think I'm ready to get outside of the U.S. and go someplace different.
I think it's time to head over the pond.
I think we should head over to the pond, and I'd like to welcome back one of our favorite guests from all the way in the U.K., John. How are you doing today, John?
I'm doing really well, thanks, Steve, and hi, Christy.
Hi.
And I'm super excited because you, out of everybody that we've talked to, is going to be on a Disney ship before the rest of us.
Woohoo! 34 days.
34 days.
Really cool. So by the time this episode comes out, you'll have cruised already, which is super exciting. We will definitely have you back on to discuss that when you get back. We will all be living vicariously through your cruise and filled with envy and jealousy. But very happy for you.
Let's hope so. It's going to be a bit of a test for everybody, isn't it? The new way of cruising. So hopefully Disney will have figured it out. It'll be great.
Yes.
I don't know, just being able to be, in your balcony watching the sea go by as you're sailing along. I think that is a soothing sound and experience I think a lot of people would love to have right now.
Yeah.
So I'm going to put you on the spot. You got a decision to make on Tuesday, July 29th. Are you going to watch the sail away of the Disney Dream as she goes out on her test cruise? Or are you June 29th? Excuse me, June 29th. Or will you be cheering on your football team in the Euro Cup?
Round of 16.
Yeah, the round of 16.
Wow, that was a lot, Steve, to get.
I'm sure the listeners really don't care about the answer to this question. I'm sure they don't. But as it happens, I have a problem, which is I have to pick the kids up from school.
Oh no!
At exactly the same time as the England match is happening. So I already have a problem. Don't tell me I've got to do something else at the same time. It's not going to work.
Go ahead, Christy.
That's the beauty of cell phones, right? You could be sitting in the school pickup line and looking at things on your phone, hopefully not crashing into children.
Yeah.
But then again, are you a DVR type person, or is that even still a thing, DVR? Will you record it and watch it, or will you want to know what is happening live?
I'll record it and be avoiding all media. That's the plan. So the kids have all been briefed. Don't just tell me nothing.
If they give anything away, leave them home on the cruise. Don't take them. So tell them that's a
good threat. I like it.
Well, I will say, best of luck to England. This hopefully will be their year to make it back to the championship and beyond. So, but we're going to turn our thoughts today to the Baltic as we continue our port adventure series. And I think this is a part of the world, Christy, that I don't know how many people think about wanting to cruise the Baltic per se, at least here in the U.S. I think it seems kind of far away and maybe just out there a little bit. But I'm going to tell you that I think this, Alaska is beautiful. Norway was amazing, but I think this is one of our favorite cruises as well.
It is elusive. It is far off. It is something that very few people, I think, overall, and even cruisers have done. It is definitely something I need to learn more about. So I'm super excited to be recording this episode. I have clients that are booked on the Disney Baltic cruise for next summer. So I'm definitely excited to hear again all of the options, because I know we have talked about it before, but now to have it all in one location during one podcast episode, I really think is going to be helpful, not only for myself, but for everybody else who is interested in this cruise going forward.
And so we did record with you, John, your family's trip when you went to the Baltic, and we'll get that episode out. I'll make sure I put it in the show notes, and I'll get up here and get it out here in a second. But
in the meantime, somebody can Google. I'm going to keep reminding people every single time. Google DCL podcast and the Baltic, and you will come up with the show notes. So whenever I'm trying to find something, because I'll be like, oh, somebody wants to listen to the Panama Canal cruise or this or that, you just Google it and it pops up. I love Google. How did we live without Google?
I don't know. I really don't know. So, John, why don't you remind everybody when you guys went and why did you guys want to go to the Baltic?
It's been a little while. We went in May 2017, and we took a 7-night cruise up to the Baltic on the Disney Magic. For us, it was our second Disney cruise. Our first one was up to Norway, where we met you guys, Steve. We sailed as a party of 4, so myself, my wife, and our 2 boys. And I guess we went because the cities are iconic. They're the places that you'd see on a list and go, I'd really, really like to go there. That just sounds like an interesting country and an interesting city to go to. At that point, we weren't quite ready to fly with youngish children back over to the States and head down to the Caribbean. So we wanted to do another European cruise, and that one sounded like the most fun.
How old were your boys then?
They'd have been 11 and 7.
And then, Steve, when did you go to the Baltic?
So we also went to the Baltic in 2017. We did a 9-night cruise with our friends on Norwegian that we travel with. We went on the Getaway, which is a lot like, it's a ship that was made by Meyer Werft, and it's very similar to what the Disney Wish and the next 3 ships are going to be in size. So it's just an amazing ship. And I want to give a plug. Sometimes Disney can be too expensive for people, and I totally understand that. And you can find some pretty reasonable rates with Norwegian, a couple of the other cruise lines over in Europe. And I will say that we've been on Norwegian twice in Europe, and it is a very different experience, I think, sailing with them in Europe than it is possibly, especially with the spring break crowd out of Florida or something like that. And for a family, I think it's also a cruise that you could easily do with kids. And
so in your cruise then, Steve, didn't have your kids were not with you?
No, we were just, it was just adults as far. So there were 6 of us, and we sailed just like John did out of Copenhagen, which is just an amazing city. I wish we'd had more time there. Our friends actually flew in a couple of days before us, but we were kind of limited on vacation time. So we flew in the night before, spent the evening there, had a wonderful dinner, and then we headed to the ship the next day, which is it was a super easy port to leave from, right, John?
Yeah, it's about 15 minutes in a taxi from the where all the hotels are in the city centre. Super easy.
And I guess just to circle back, we Airbnb'd it in Copenhagen, and that was a very easy way to do, because as you kind of find out, a great way to see Scandinavia, because it is so expensive, is I think via cruise ship. It kind of reduces your prices a little bit because it can be very expensive hotel-wise, but using an Airbnb was a great way for us to kind of cut down the cost a little bit in Copenhagen. So, John, what did you guys do in Copenhagen?
We flew in the day before, just like you did, but we landed kind of late morning. So we had a bit of time in Copenhagen before the cruise and then some time after the cruise. We stayed in a hotel. We didn't Airbnb. We stayed in a hotel right in the city centre, 3 or 4 minute walk from the central train station called the Absalon. Lovely hotel. And that first afternoon and evening, we just walked around the city, explored a little bit. It's not a tiny city. So if you're going to walk for an hour or 2, you probably need some decent shoes if you're going to see most of the sites there are to see in the city centre area. We ended up in the old port, which is called Nyhavn, some lovely old buildings, had some dinner there, and then just walked back to the hotel through the shopping district. So just a bit of an explorer on that first day. On our debarkation day at the end of the cruise, we booked a half-day excursion with Disney. I'm not sure they do it everywhere, do they, Christy? But on some destinations, you can book an official Disney excursion for that day when you get off. We hadn't booked that before the cruise. We didn't know about it. We kind of spotted it while we were on the ship. That worked out really well for us. It was a guided bus tour for a half a day. And we just toured around the main sites in the city. So the Little Mermaid statue. We went and visited the Amalienborg Palace, which is where the Danish royal family reside. Took a trip around the old port area again, past the Tivoli Gardens amusement park, and then on to a different palace, which is called Christiansborg Palace, which is the formal palace where the Danish queen meets dignitaries, holds her receptions, and where the prime minister has his office. And we got to do an inside tour of that. Super lavish, amazingly decorated, beautiful paintings. Great to see that. We went out past the Opera House, had a little stop off there, and then through what's supposedly a really famous hippie commune, which has existed in Copenhagen since the 1970s, called Christiania. I'd never heard of it. And we drove through there and kind of all stared at the hippies. So yeah, I guess we spent half a day and then half a day in Copenhagen, only scratched the surface, but there's loads to see in Copenhagen.
So one of the advantages of doing one of these Disney excursions after a cruise is that they deal with your luggage. So a big problem is that if you had a day in a city, so you had a late flight, and sometimes these European cruises, it does work out this way because, they'll only fly back to certain places at certain times of day. So if you want to tool around and visit things, what are you going to do with your luggage? So if you book something through Disney, they then will deal with your luggage, which is perfect. So Steve, you didn't spend a lot of time in Copenhagen, but what are some of the other things a person can do if they had more time there?
Well, we did actually get up, and because of our friends or one couple, they are always super planners. And so they got us up early, and we actually walked down and toured Amalienborg Palace before we went and got on the ship that day. And what was kind of neat about that, as John was talking about, is just the amazing paintings and just the history around it. And but what I found fascinating was comparing it later when we got to St. Petersburg, the differences between the palaces there and what you see in St. Petersburg, which is just over the top. Yeah, there's a lot of different things that you can do in Copenhagen, as John was talking about. There's lots of castles, the Frederiksberg Castle, Kronborg Castle, which is a castle made famous in Shakespeare's play Hamlet. You can take a canal boat tour, which actually we did. We did that evening. We also took a canal boat tour through the city, and they kind of give you the highlights, sort of like Amsterdam, which was kind of a neat way to spend it before we had dinner. You can go horseback riding, kayaking. There's a Viking ship museum you can visit, and just many great opportunities depending upon what your family likes to do. John, if you had something to choose today in Copenhagen, what would it be?
That's a good question, Steve. Well, as it happens, we are going back. We're booked to go back there in 2022. So I've started to have a little look at it already. And we'll probably pick one of the tours out to one of those castles that you mentioned that are outside of Copenhagen. That looks fun. It'll get us out of the city. We'll get to see some of the Danish countryside. So we'll probably do that.
So let's kind of move on to your first port, which was Estonia. I want to just throw this out. Not most of them, but several, I take that back, only one of them coming up in 2022. Another port that is very popular with the other cruise lines and Disney generally stops at too is Warnemünde, which is your opportunity to get to Berlin. We'll just say that it's a 2 or 3 hour bus ride. Do you remember, John? 3. It's a 3-hour bus ride to get to Berlin. So it's 6 hours of travel to go and spend a couple hours in the city. And we elected not to do that. I think that if we ever go into Berlin, we'll just travel to Berlin by itself. But that is an opportunity to see Berlin if you go to Warnemünde. John, you kind of had the same feel, or you guys have the same feelings with your, not possibly.
Yeah, so we're going there in 2022 as well. I think my take on it is, if it was going to be your only ever visit to Europe, then probably you'd want to make the effort and go down to Berlin, because if you're only going to get the chance to see it once, then it's a beautiful city and you should probably go and see it, with an enormous amount of history to go and have a look at. But, for us, it's a 2-hour flight from the UK over to Berlin. So we could get there more rapidly than we can get there from Warnemünde, frankly. So we'll probably one day go and do a 2 or 3 day short trip there.
That sounds like probably a more reasonable way to get there from your location. Okay,
well, let's move on and talk about Estonia, which is one of the 3 Baltic states alongside Latvia and Lithuania. This ended up being one of our favorite stops besides St. Petersburg. I didn't know what to expect, but it was a beautiful little city. Estonia is a small country with a population of just over 1 million people, and was part of the Soviet Union until 1991. The capital city is the walled city of Tallinn, and that's where the cruise companies visit. John, how did you spend your time in Tallinn?
So we loved Tallinn as well. As you say, it's quite small. The ship docks really quite close to the city centre, so it's absolutely within walking distance. It's maybe a 30-minute walk from where the ship docks into the city, although Disney do put on free shuttle buses to take you in as well. Architecturally, its history kind of makes it strange in that there's lots of 1960s concrete, which is all the Soviet buildings. They've started to modernize it, so there are a bunch of modern commercial buildings, but then the much older part of the city has been kept intact, and that's obviously the most interesting part, and that part is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. So when we went, we'd booked our usual bus tour, and it took us to various sites in and around Tallinn, but without doubt It's the old part of the city which is the highlight. And I'd strongly advise people to spend as much time as you can just walking around that area and looking at the old buildings and going in and out of the churches and just having a good old explore. I think, is that what you did, Steve?
Yeah, we signed up for a walking tour, and it was probably about 2 hours, and they kind of took us through the old town, told us the history of Tallinn, Lithuania. They talked a lot. I mean, one of the things that I really enjoyed, and part of this is just because of my age, growing up through the Cold War and watching the Cold War end, was kind of, hearing what it was like to live behind the Iron Curtain and underneath the Soviet Union for a lot of the people in these different countries. So we got a lot of history. And then I think that worked out perfect for us, because after that, it was just about time for lunch. We found a great place to eat. There's a couple of touristy places. We skipped those where they kind of put on the different outfits and stuff. We found just like a little cafe off a side street. Enjoyed that. And then just did some shopping. It was a wonderful day.
Do you remember what kind of food you ate? Like what?
Oh yeah.
At the cafe.
This was right up your alley. It was fish.
Oh.
Fish and mussels. So
fantastic. Were most of the meals fish? I mean, was that mostly what was offered, or like what other options?
I think seafood is a big part of the Baltic and in the Scandinavian states. Don't you say, John?
Yeah, I think that's right. I think we went to a cafe in Tallinn as well. I think we had cake, Christy. That's probably you'd have probably liked that a whole lot more.
So I will starve in Tallinn, is what you guys are saying. I like cake, but I probably can't eat the cake. And
yeah, I'm pretty sure they had. I can't remember exactly because it's been a couple of years now, but I know they had different options as well. It wasn't all seafood, so I think you would be able to find something that would keep you going. And if not, when you get back on the ship, I'm sure there would be something there.
Well, and as any good person with food restrictions knows, you carry a hearty granola bar with you everywhere you go, so that you are never in a situation where you literally have nothing to eat, or you just eat the seafood that you otherwise wouldn't choose once they say it was prepared safely. Or
if you're like our kids, you steal a couple bagels from Cabanas as you walk off the ship to throw in mom's purse. So. Perfect
idea too.
Exactly.
I actually would do that often. I would get a gluten-free bagel, put some cream cheese on it, wrap it in a paper towel, and shove it in my bag. And I would eat that and have that with us to eat when we would do some tours and stuff too, where I wasn't sure what my options were going to be.
Very smart. Well, let's move on. Let's get back on the ship, and then we'll head on over. And this next port, I think, is the creme de la creme of going to the Baltic. At least it was for us. Well, talking about St. Petersburg, there's just so much to do in this city that definitely, one day is just going to scratch the surface. If you can do two, that would be great. Disney has traditionally spent just one day in St. Petersburg, although embarkation time is usually around midnight, so you can spend the whole day and the evening off the ship. We haven't done an evening excursion, but they look amazing. You can go to the ballet. You can take in a private concert at the Hermitage Museum, which we'll talk about, and you can take a nighttime canal boat tour. Christy, 2022?
2022, Disney is actually offering an 11-night cruise to the Baltic, which does have 2 full days in St. Petersburg, which obviously would be amazing. Now I really need to go and do this. John, what did you decide to do in St. Petersburg?
So we were only there for a day. I'd have loved to have had 2 or 3 days there as well. For sure, you could fill those easily. Our kids were still quite young when we went, so we were still at the stage when we were avoiding really long 9 or 10 hour excursions. So we picked another half-day excursion. We took a canal boat ride through the city, which passed some of the main sites that you can see, such as the Hermitage Museum, the Peter and Paul Fortress. And then we moved on to an amazing cathedral called the Cathedral of Spilled Blood, which is called that because it was built on the site where Tsar Alexander II was assassinated at the end of the 19th century. The cathedral was officially closed on the day we went, but Disney waved their magic wand, as they do, arranged special access, which was fantastic. We pretty much had the place to ourselves, which was just great, avoided all the crowds. And it's a beautiful cathedral. It's full of mosaics, 70,000 square feet of mosaics. And our guide told us an interesting story of how the cathedral took 23 years to build. But during the Soviet era, the communists didn't care about cathedrals. They let it become derelict. It was used as a warehouse. The pigeons took it over and made it their home. And then they only started restoring it in the 1970s. It took 27 years to complete that restoration, so longer than it took to build it in the first place. And a beautiful cathedral if anybody has the opportunity to go and do that. And then our tour had a little shopping stop at the end. It took us to, I guess it was a touristy shop, but it didn't really feel touristy. And it sold Russian gifts, Matryoshka dolls, those dolls where you take the doll out of the doll, out of the doll. Sold Fabergé eggs, lots of amber jewelry. And you could have spent a huge amount of money in there. They had items costing thousands of dollars. But I remember we bought some gifts for friends and a couple of items for ourselves. And I think we came away having spent a couple of $100, something like that. So that felt pretty decent value to us. We didn't take an evening tour either, but lots of people we saw heading off the ship looking very smart, clearly off to the ballet or off to the opera. And we chatted to some people the next day who did say they'd had an absolutely amazing time. Yeah, St. Petersburg, we really did only scratch the surface. There's a huge amount that you could do.
How far is the port from like the city center?
It is a bit of a bus ride. I think my recollection, Steve, is maybe 45 minutes into the city.
I think that's about right. The one good thing about the Baltic too is, yeah, that was a 45-minute ride, but it's not quite like the Mediterranean where you have to travel so much further on the buses. Most of the stops that you stop into, you're going to be able to be in access to cities pretty quickly.
So, Steve, I believe you had 2 days in St. Petersburg. What did you do?
We did. And I want to give a plug for a tour company outside of the cruise lines. We used SPB Tours Baltic. Just Google it, and had an amazing time. So we had 2 days. And what I thought was kind of cool about using them was we booked a 2-day tour from them. So the first day you went and saw a bunch of different museums, went back to the ship, spent the night on the ship. And we did not do anything in the evenings, which I kind of regret. Then the second day you get back up and you're with the same guide for 2 days. And so you could really build a rapport with her or him. By the end of the tour, it was, I don't want to call it ABD-like, but it really was, as far as she was so approachable and would just talk about anything. I can't speak highly enough. SPB Tours Baltic.
How would that work if you were doing it privately? It's 45 minutes to the city center. So did the tour company pick you up, or did you? Okay. Yeah,
you get off the ship and they had a couple different buses right there. There was probably 15 people on our tour, and you just got on the bus and they took you right on your way. The other thing that they kind of do, and you kind of hear this in Rome, it's called like skip the line tour or whatever else. But a lot of these tour companies will get you into the museums first before it opens up to the general public. It's not like just 15 of us. There was like hundreds of people when we went to the Hermitage Museum. But it was much better than once, I think 9 or 10 o'clock when it opened up to the rest of the public. And you could see the lines outside of the museums of people waiting to get in. So that was an advantage of going with the tour company as well.
And then how did the visas work? Did the cruise lines work that out? Do you need a visa when you're on a cruise?
I honestly can't remember. We certainly didn't need to arrange anything ourselves. I think because we were with Disney, we were kind of waved through, I suppose. We didn't need a separate visa. So if something was needed to be done, Disney did it. So
since you booked the tour through Disney, Disney took care of it. Because we booked it with SPB, they took care of it.
So for our listeners, you just need to make sure you watch for that, because I'm like, I know there's a visa for St. Petersburg. So you're cruising with Disney. I'm going to assume that this is still going to be the case. Disney is not going to, they'll put it somewhere if you needed it, but they're going to take care of making sure you have the visa. If you're doing a private tour company, just make sure that you are doing a private tour with a company that's going to take care of that for you as well.
And they all will. I think that really where you run into the problem would be is if you're just going to get off the ship by yourself and tour around, which you can do. At that point, you could go with the cruise line. Will be able to work that visa for you as well, as you said, Christy. We had a wonderful time. We ended up visiting just a lot of museums since we didn't have kids. And I mean, this is Onawake, my wife's favorite city. She read a lot about this. She loves the Tsar. She loves the whole idea of, I can't remember her name. Who's the princess that is supposedly still
Anastasia?
Anastasia, yeah. The whole idea of Anastasia. And I think one of my favorite characters reading history as I was growing up was Rasputin, actually. So we actually went to the spot where Rasputin spent his last day before he made it to the bridge and finally was succumbed to his injuries. But we ended up visiting Peter and Paul Fortress. We went to the Winter Palace of Peterhof. We also went to the Hermitage Museum. We visited the Church of Spilled Blood, as you did, John. We had 2 amazing lunches featuring a vodka at the end with a little toast. So vodka. Yeah, vodka. But it was just an amazing city. And I'm not even going to try and do it. The palaces are so gigantic. and so over the top compared to anything that I've seen. I've not been to Versailles, but I think that that's the only thing that really compares from what I've heard in Europe. Yeah, we can't wait to go back to St. Petersburg at some point just to take it all in again.
John, what will you do when you go back?
So we'd love to go back. We don't have anything booked. So what we're doing in 2022 doesn't go to St. Petersburg. It's probably top of our list for 2023. And we definitely want to go for 2 full days somehow. And I think if we did it, honestly, we'd probably take Steve's advice. We'd probably look up SPB tours, and we'd want to do the full thing. We'd want to go to the palaces. We want to do the Hermitage Museum. We'd probably want to do something in the evening as well. Maybe, I don't know, the ballet or the opera, whichever. Yeah, I'd love to go back, and we'd do the whole full thing.
It looks like it's still in operation too, because, after COVID, you actually don't know what's going to be in existence still. So I have just looked it up. They have packages. They help you design your own packages. They say they have a price guarantee, so you're going to get the best value for your money. They've got you covered during your trip with your visa. There's prompt response if you ask them questions. So it also looks like they cover Russia, Germany, and Scandinavia and Estonia. Cool company.
Yeah, if anybody happens to book a tour with them, we'd love to hear feedback on it if they do. Well, let's move on to our next stop, which was Helsinki. And this was the one that we had the shortest time in on our cruise. So John, I'm not sure about you guys, but we did a boat trip cruising around some of the islands outside Helsinki, where many of the locals have their summer homes. And that was really kind of neat to see. That's like I think a part of the fabric of Scandinavian society is a lot of people have these little summer homes, whether in Norway. I know I flew with a guy that's from Norway, and they have like their little cabin that's up in the mountains, and they don't go there in the summer. They go there in the winter so they can get out and cross country ski. But in Helsinki, there was all these little islands around the capital itself there, where there was these little summer houses with boats on it. And it was just amazing to see those. It was kind of a quiet day for us, so we'd like to go back to Helsinki one day to explore a little bit more. We did go to the Church of the Rock, though, too, which was kind of neat to see. I think, John, did you guys go there?
Yep. Yeah, we did. So surprise, surprise. Guess what we did? We did a bus tour. I think, yeah, you're right. I think we didn't arrive till late morning, maybe just around lunchtime. So we took a bus out into the Finnish countryside. It wasn't the greatest excursion we've ever done, honestly. It was kind of a so-so day for us, Helsinki. We visited a farm where we ate some more cake. And then they took us to some artsy, crafty little town, which wasn't really super interesting. But the highlight for us was the Rock Church, which is back in Helsinki itself. So it's famous. It's not an old church. It was built in the 1960s by 2 brothers, and it's called the Rock Church because they built it into the rock itself. So when you walk inside, the interior walls are literally just bare rock. And then they've added on a beautiful copper ceiling. So it's beautiful. It's a beautiful church, well worth a visit. Helsinki definitely, of all of the places, I think, doesn't have as much to see that's of historical interest, if that's your thing, as some of the other cities.
A tip I guess I would give is, I was just thinking about it with this SPB tours, which also goes to Helsinki and the other cities that we're going to cover in a moment. Check to see what their general tours include. Then you'll know what's apparently the most popular thing, or the thing you're supposed to look at in that location. And you can decide how you want to do it, or, whether you want to do it with Disney. So if you go to another tour company that is already established and just see where they're going, then you can say, hey, does this seem like something my family would be interested in? Or what is the highlight of that city? And then you don't have to do the research yourself. You can let them do it for you.
Good advice.
Definitely. Well, from Helsinki, let's move on to another just gem along this tour, which is Stockholm, Sweden, the capital of Sweden. And John, I'll let you give the little warning. It's not that big of a warning, but I think the magic used to be able to park downtown. It's small enough. I know our cruise ship didn't, but I guess maybe you guys didn't as well, John.
I love Stockholm. Stockholm is my favorite city. But I haven't visited most of the famous things in St. Petersburg. So in 2023, maybe I'll change my mind. But today, I love Stockholm. I've been a couple of times. Caroline and I have been together before we had kids as well. And I partly love it because of what you just talked about, Steve. If you arrive there by cruise ship into Stockholm itself, it's something truly special. But like you say, the bigger cruise ships aren't able to get into the city centre of Stockholm, and they park up in a town called Nynäshamn, which is about 40 miles away from Stockholm. And that's where you went, Steve. So you can talk about that in a sec, I guess. And DCL seem to not be able to make their mind up what they're going to do. So in 2022, one of the DCL cruises goes to Nynäshamn, but one of the other ones goes into the centre of Stockholm. So it's absolutely worth checking. It matters to me because that approach into Stockholm is just an incredible experience on a ship. And that's because for about the final 2 hours before you arrive, you're just sailing through these tiny little channels, tiny little pieces of water. And you mentioned the summer homes. There's just hundreds and hundreds of little islands, some with summer houses on, some uninhabited. And you're so close to them that you can really feel as if you're standing on your balcony, you could reach out and touch them. It's one of the most spectacular sights you'll ever see. And I've been lucky enough to experience it a couple of times. If you are on a cruise that goes into Stockholm itself, I'd absolutely recommend, don't miss that bit. You might have to get up a bit early, but just get on the deck, take it all in, grab a window seat in Cabanas if Cabanas is open, and just experience everything you can. Obviously, the ship departs the same way, so you could see it on departure, but clearly if you've got dinner, it's likely to coincide with dinner and you might miss out. So best to see it on the way in. So that's partly why I love Stockholm, but also it's just a great city. There's so much to do in Stockholm. It's another city where 2 or 3 days would pass by really quickly. And when we went with DCL, we didn't book an official excursion because we already knew our way around. Although, again, there's a free shuttle bus that takes you into the city centre. It's about a 15-minute drive into the city centre. So we did jump on that. And then we took a hop-on, hop-off ferry over to the Vasa Museum because Stockholm is a bunch of islands. So you can go around by road, but also there's ferries that take you from one island to the other. And our first stop was the Vasa Museum. And I think we've talked about this before, Steve. So I guess briefly, the museum houses a famous ship called the Vasa, which was a Swedish 64-gun warship. And it was one of the least successful ships ever built because it sank on its maiden voyage in 1628 after sailing 1,400 yards.
Oh, God.
It was top heavy. They built too much above the water and not enough below the water, so it fell over.
Which is why ships now do a float out during the building process.
Exactly. I think that was the float out and it wasn't very successful. So it sank. It sank to the bottom of Stockholm Harbour. And you would expect it to erode and decompose over the years, but it didn't. It lay there for 333 years in unique sea conditions, which meant that it survived intact. And then it was salvaged in 1961. And the wooden hull, so the main part of the ship, was pretty much intact. Over the 40 years since then, they've fully restored it, and it's the world's only preserved 17th century ship. I've been there a couple of times. It's a great museum. But I remember that for our then 11-year-old, it was probably the highlight of the whole vacation. It's an incredible ship. I think you said as well, Steve, in a show, it actually made me feel very emotional to walk in and see it, even on the second occasion when I'd seen it before, because it's just such a unique piece of history. The museum does get busy, so if you can try and get there early before the lines build up, that's probably a pro tip. So we did the Vasa Museum. We also took in the ABBA Museum, so the band ABBA. It's almost next door to the Vasa Museum. It's a pretty good museum. It's quite pricey, but if ABBA were your thing, then it's probably a must-do. So both of those two attractions are on an island called Djurgården. And on that island, there's also an open-air museum called Skansen, where they've put a bunch of historical buildings. It's probably worth a visit if you're in Stockholm for a few days. I wouldn't recommend it as a priority if you're just there for a few hours. And then the other main island in Stockholm where there's lots to do is called Gamlestan, which is the Old Town area. It's one of those areas where it's just fun to walk around the cobbled streets, poke about in the shops, look for somewhere where you can go and sit and have a coffee and a slice of cake. But it's also the area where the Royal Palace is located, where the Swedish royal family still reside. You can take a tour inside that. City Hall's there. The Nobel Prize Museum, where you can explore the history of all those Nobel Prizes, is in that same area. But there's opportunities if you want to get out of the city as well. And probably the best excursion is There's a tour out to a palace called Drottningholm Palace, which is where the Swedish royal family used to spend their summers. And that tour normally includes a trip on a vintage steamer, so a bit like a paddle steamer, I guess, but probably without the paddle. And I think you normally spend about an hour out on the steamer going out to that palace. And we haven't done that, but I'd love to do that one day as well. So that's me being very enthusiastic about Stockholm. I love Stockholm.
Steve, what did you do in Stockholm?
Well, we love Stockholm as well. And I think that's what just makes the Baltic so amazing. It's just the old town area, which is just so well preserved. It's so different compared to anything that we have in the States to be able to walk around and see that. But yeah, our ship was too big to go downtown, so we parked in Nynäshamn. We didn't book a tour. We just kind of did it ourselves on John's recommendation for the Vasa. We went online and got tickets ahead of time. I remember doing that. But we just got off. There's a train that runs. It's really easy to jump onto. I think it's about a 30 or 40 minute ride into the city, it was beautiful because we just went through the countryside, really forested, beautiful countryside. And then we made our way to the Vasa Museum, saw that, just spectacular, so much history behind it. As John said, it kind of takes your breath away when you see how big this ship was. And to think that, unfortunately, it only sailed, 1,400 yards or so, meters. But yeah, just a great museum. And then from there, we just kind of wandered around. We found a great little brew pub that was along the water, had a drink, and then made our way down to Gamla Stan, found a cafe. We actually got to see they had like the changing of the guards in front of the royal palace there. So we watched that and we were able to take that in, and then made our way back to the train station and back to the ship. As John said, if you're going to go here, probably kind of like when we went up to the fjord in Geiranger, a lot of people got up early to be able to kind of take in the scenery. This is one of those places where you want to do it. We did not do it, unfortunately, but we did get to see some of the islands as we sailed out, because being a Norwegian, we didn't have to be at dinner at a certain time. We got to choose.
You also got inedible food, but at least you got to, I'm kidding.
Well, that's a different story, which we could talk about. But it is definitely one of those cities that there's so much to do and see there that we would love to go back to Stockholm as well at some point. And we will. I can't wait. This is one of these cruises that I can't wait to rebook again with our kids, and hopefully on Disney next time. I guess we talked about Warnemünde already. Another main port in the Baltic that Disney stops at on some of the cruises is Oslo, which is the capital of Norway. Have you been there, John?
I have been there, but it was more than 25 years ago. So my memories of it are a little hazy. But on our itinerary that we have booked for 2022, it is a port that we are due to visit. So I'll have to let you know about that next year, Steve.
I actually got to spend 4 days in Oslo in the summer one time in the Air Force, and it was amazing. It was a beautiful city. We went up. There's a ski jump there that they've kept up and they still use. It was in the 1960s something Olympics, I believe, which is kind of amazing to go see. There's a whole history behind ski jumping. Obviously, alpine sports are very big up in Norway and in Scandinavia. And you can ride all the way up to the very top and stare down it. And I cannot imagine anybody doing that.
No, you've got to be brave or a little bit crazy. I think you're probably both.
Yeah, you have to be like maybe Eddie the Eagle, I guess, to have his. Do you remember who I'm talking about there, John?
Yeah. No, he's a personality in this country. He had zero talent, but a lot of bravery.
He had a lot of bravery to go.
Chrissy's looking confused, like she has no idea what we're talking about.
No idea.
Definitely a lot of bravery. Well, if anybody, I think there's a documentary about him. If not, I'm sure you can find some YouTube videos for anybody who wants to look up Eddie the Eagle. But yeah, just a great city, port city again. You can do all kinds of like evening cruises, lots of good seafood there. And the royal family palace is right there in the middle of town, which is kind of neat to see.
So there's one more city that the Baltic cruise that my clients are going on next year, Riga, Latvia's capital. Have either of you guys been there?
No, I know nothing. I did see it was on the schedule for next year, but no, I know nothing about it at all.
Steve?
No, we haven't been there either, but being part of the Baltic states, like Estonia, it's a place that really intrigues me to go to.
It's set on the Baltic Sea, the mouth of the river, who knows how to say that word, Daugava?
Sounds
something,
good.
Something. It's on the mouth of a river. Is considered a cultural center and home to many museums and concert halls. City is known for wooden buildings, Art Nouveau architecture, and the medieval old town. And it's a pedestrian-only town. that has many shops and restaurants and a busy square with bars and nightclubs. So looks like that would be an easy town to walk around. Probably if Disney has to park outside of the town, then they'll bust you in like they would the other ports, I would imagine.
Good on Disney for adding it and choosing somewhere new. It's good.
Yeah.
So I guess before we wrap up, I don't remember who said this. The crew member that said this is their favorite. Was that you on your sailing, John?
I think you said it originally that you talked to some Disney crew guys who said that the Baltic was there. But then I asked some crew members as well. And it's an answer you hear a lot. Lots of crew members really love going to the Baltic.
I mean, to go to new places, right? Because this is why you cruise. And we've had other cast member or crew on, they're excited also to reach out to new places and to see new places. And so Caribbean is fine, right? But they can go to their internet cafe. But this, they can actually explore and do the things that they otherwise, wouldn't get to necessarily see. Or it is their home and they just get to go back home and, that type of thing. So I can imagine that's some of the reason behind that.
I think also, John, you've sailed on mostly the Magic like we have. It tends to be the crew members on it have been on that ship for a long time. And I think that speaks a lot to the different ports it goes to, the different areas of the world that they can go and visit and see. And I think that's probably where that comes from a little bit too, is, as you guys have said, is it's such a different area. It's easy to get on and off and into the different cities and just so much history to see and explore. So, and the other, we haven't really talked about this, but a lot of people talk about the Mediterranean Sea and how blue the waters are and how calm it is. The Baltic in the summer is the same way. I don't know, John, if you can talk about just sailing on the Baltic Sea itself at all.
Yeah, I mean, it's flat. So if movement of the ship is something that concerns you, chances are there really won't be any. You'd be very unlucky, I think. And you're just sailing past beautiful coastlines. So it's 20 degrees colder than the Mediterranean. So I wouldn't want to fall in it. But it's a beautiful part of the world.
Well, I guess as we finish up, John, thank you so much for coming back on and helping us with our Port Adventure series. And did we talk about it at the beginning? Well, let's talk about what you guys have planned. I know you've got the 2-night sailing on the Magic coming up here in England, but in 2022, what is it that you guys booked again?
Sure. So so the staycations are 3 nights out of Liverpool at the end of July. So we're looking forward to that. It'll be interesting to see how it's different to the cruises that we've been on before. And then we have 18 nights, so an 11-night and a 7-night back-to-back. So Northern Europe, so Amsterdam up to Norway, Copenhagen, and then an 11-night up to Iceland, and then back via Scotland. So that's what we have booked in 2022. So really excited about that.
Christy, any final thoughts as we finish up here?
I'm very jealous. Those are my final thoughts. Definitely have to figure out how to get out there.
And John, any final thoughts as we finish up talking about the Baltic?
I just encourage people. I mean, I guess often people worry about what are the barriers to enjoying visiting a country. And Scandinavia, I think, is really accessible because certainly in Denmark and in Sweden in particular, 100% of people will speak really good English. And even in Russia, most of the people you encounter in those tourist places will speak English. So I think I'd just say to people, it's really not scary. I think the Baltic countries are really accessible, very welcoming of visitors. So I'd encourage anybody to do it. We're certainly planning to do it again.
And I guess, we mentioned your kids kind of briefly, like that you did some half-day tours and stuff like that, but we didn't. Is there any tips that you would have for people traveling with kids? As a reminder, your children were 11 and 7 when you did this cruise. I think that's always, people are always like, is this accessible? Is this an opportunity that I should be taking my children to? Is this something that would be difficult to do? What would be the right age? Things like that.
I think you've just got to use your common sense. I think the same applies. The guys you had on a couple of weeks ago from New York who were talking about the Mediterranean, their daughter was 7 or 8, I think, at the time, wasn't she?
Yeah.
And all of these cities, there's a huge amount of history. And also these are cruises that don't have so many sea days. So you might be doing 3 port days in a row. And you could easily fall into the trap of saying, well, I want to see that, and I want to see that, and I want to see that. So you could end up booking 3 9-hour, 10-hour tours on consecutive days, and that's hard for your typical adult, to be honest. So an under, a 7, 8, 9, 10-year-old child's going to find that really difficult. So I think you've just got to use common sense and know what your kids are capable of and know what their limits are. And if you've booked a long tour one day, then hey, maybe do a half-day tour the next day. You've just got to pace yourself. We've tried to do that. So yeah, we tried to do that. And certainly you've done that as well, Steve, on your Mediterranean cruise that you took. Your Cannes day was pretty much a down day, wasn't it? You didn't book an excursion at all. So I wouldn't be afraid of taking children at all. Just use your common sense.
And I guess the other thing I would throw out there too is just know your kids. I mean, there's a lot of kids that really enjoy history. I feel like I'm maybe talking too much about history, but there are a lot of kids that get a lot out of these type of cruises. And just because your kid's 7, and if they're that type of kid, take them, go. If it's in your means and you want to do it, you don't necessarily have to wait till they're 15 or so. But then again, if your children are not maybe that engaged in that type of stuff, maybe this is something that you put off until they get a little bit older. But either way, I think whether you go with your kids or not, this intrigues you. I highly recommend anybody look into it because it's just a beautiful part of the world, and we can't wait to go back. So I guess we'll just kind of finish it with that. John, thank you so much for all you do for our show. Thanks for coming back on. Wish you and the family the best on your, I said 2-day, but 3-day staycation on the beautiful Disney Magic. And we look forward to having you back on to talk about that and hear all about what that experience was like.
Thanks, guys. It's been fun.
Well, that's going to wrap up our show today. Once again, I really want to thank John for coming on and helping us out with our Port Adventures series as we headed north to the Baltic sailings, the Northern European sailings on the beautiful Disney Magic. Just an amazing part of the world and a place and a cruise that I don't think that you and your family would regret taking if you decide to book this cruise. For our frequent listeners, I know you'll be able to know that John and his family had already cruised on the Disney Magic. We recorded this before they did that. You can go back to episode number 218 to find out the amazing cruise sailing that they had aboard the Disney Magic as they did a Disney Magic at Sea staycation out of Liverpool. But with the ship sailing again, if you'd like to come on and share your experiences sailing on the Disney Dream, the Disney Magic, and soon to begin sailing the Disney Fantasy, you can reach out to me, Steve, at dclpodcast.com, and we'll get you lined up to come on and share your experiences to help our listeners cruise a little smarter. If you're enjoying this show, we sure would appreciate it if you know somebody else who would enjoy it, if you'd pass it on to them. Also, if you have time, go over to iTunes and leave us an iTunes review. That helps our show get to be a little bit better known in the Disney cruising, and just the Disney podcasting community in general. As always, we'd like to thank our Patreon supporters. They help bring this show each and every week to you. If you'd like to find out more about our Patreon program, you can go to patreon.com/DCLpodcast and find out all the information there. Well, between now and our next show, if you and your family are heading out on a vacation, a staycation of some sorts, which hopefully we've moved beyond that. But if you're heading out on a vacation, on behalf of myself, Steve, Christy, and Chris, all of us here at the DCL Podcast, we want to wish you and your families be well out there. Enjoy the time you have with each other, and we'll see you next time on the DCL Podcast. The DCL Podcast is not affiliated with the Disney Cruise Line, Walt Disney Company, Adventures by Disney, or Run Disney. All of the opinions expressed on our shows are those of the hosts and the guests who appear on the show. If you have any questions about any of these products, please contact the Walt Disney Company.